I'll call this meeting of the Clackamas County Commission to order and ask for the roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Bernard.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Commissioner Leininger.
Here.
Chair Lehan.
Here.
And I believe
Yes.
Damon
Oh.
is. There we go.
Here she is. Okay. Now that we are all here, we will, if I would invite you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah. I would entertain a motion to approve the order of agenda or amend it.
Madam Chair, actually, I'd like to amend the agenda because we have the mayor of Oregon City, I almost said, Milwaukee, Jeremy Ferguson here, and he has something else he has to do. So I'd like to amend that we allow the mayor of Milwaukee to speak prior to the presentation. And so as amended.
Okay.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Leininger that we amend the order of agenda to insert Mayor Ferguson ahead of the presentations. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0 and is unanimous. And so that brings us to Mayor Ferguson.
Morning, and thank you very much for making the accommodation. I appreciate that request. First, I have three quick topics. The first thing I wanted to mention is our wastewater negotiation process with the county. I apologize that it's taken so long to get back on track with finalizing the details for that. In July, I was on a trip with my daughter for her graduation, and then in August and September, I was coming on board to a new job, and this month I've been working with Commissioner Savas to get back on track. In fact, Monday we have a meeting with your county council to try to finalize those details. Second, you may have heard there was an article about the access at Riverfront Park yesterday in the Oregonian, and that article was written after a meeting that we had discussing some different options that we could possibly entertain. The county's actually been a good partner in working with us, and the article may have mischaracterized Milwaukee's position on that. What I wanted to convey is that City of Milwaukee is partnering with the county to work with ODOT to find a positive resolution on access to the Riverfront Park. And I know I've talked to at least two commissioners about Riverfront access, and I think we share the same goals in making that a regional asset. So I appreciate the continued support of Clackamas County. And then the third topic, briefly, you have before you a resolution that was passed last week at Milwaukee City Council opposing coal transport through the city of Milwaukee. And I know that there had been a request brought before you recently to entertain the idea of some similar resolution by the county. And I wanted to just let you know that for 2 months, Milwaukee City Council worked very hard in gathering data, had public forums. In fact, one public forum, we had 85 residents turn out and speak about coal transport in the city of Milwaukee. And to give you a perspective of numbers, when we have light rail meetings, we usually have about 20 people show up. When we talk about coal, we had 85 people show up. So people in the city of Milwaukee are very passionate about what is transported through our community. I would encourage you to take a look at this resolution and email or call me if you have any questions. We did a lot of research on this specific type of coal. It's being proposed to be transported down the UP main line and then potentially out to Coos Bay. You'll also notice that our resolution is a little different from other resolutions that have been passed in the area, and we were the 28th city to pass a resolution on coal. In that, we removed the Coos Bay project from the language because we don't oppose the Coos Bay export terminal. We simply oppose the transport of a specific product. So we want to be a partner with Coos Bay. We already know that there's been increased freight traffic on the UP main line down to Coos Bay. We just wanted to let folks know that we do oppose the transportation of coal through Milwaukee until a programmatic environmental impact study was done and a health assessment study was done. So we agree with Governor Kitzhaber's position as well as Senators Merkley and Wyden's position on coal export. So that's what I wanted to bring before you today. Thanks again for being a partner with the City of Milwaukee.
Thank you. And I would just say this is a topic we have yet to take up, so we'll consider this, the coal piece, the access to sewage treatment plant. We have had some preliminary discussions on, and we are likewise motivated to find a solution that will work for everybody, and working with ODOT. So we are working on that one.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks again for the agenda change.
And then that brings us to the first of two presentations we have. One is the Clackamas County 3D Downtown Projects, and we have Catherine Comer, and she is from Business and Economic Development, and another person.
Good morning, Chair Lehan and Commissioners. Thank you for allowing us this morning to present our 3D Downtown programs. I would like to introduce Greg Mitchell, who is an associate with LRS Architects, who is going to tag team with me on this presentation. We are excited about the progress since last year when we introduced our 3D Downtown program, which was a program using dedicated economic development funds to encourage private investment and revitalization of our downtown and historic commercial cores throughout the county. We had 8 cities participating: Canby, Estacada, Happy Valley, Lake Oswego, Milwaukee, Molalla, Oregon City, and Sandy. Our goal was in bringing forward these particular designs was to look at a variety of issues that downtowns face with revitalization, such as parking issues, such as bringing higher density downtown, addressing adaptive reuse of alleys, and other projects which we will go through on a case-by-case basis. So these were design grants valued at $5,000 each. So I'm happy to report today that out of our initial $50,000 investment of the dedicated economic development funds, there has to date been over $500,000 of private investment that has occurred in the downtowns because of this program, with a potential of over $30 million private investment if all of these were built out. So we'd like to take you through this morning the 8 programs that we are working with and give you an overview of how we address the issues and what our design visioning for these projects incurred. The first one in Canby was a redevelopment of an existing property that the property owner wanted to look at infill development that would be compatible with other commercial uses in the downtown. So again, this is a potential over $4 million in private investment. So Greg's going to talk a little bit about the approach and what this project is.
Thank you, Catherine, and I'd also like to thank Clackamas County on behalf of LRS to participate in this program. It was actually a lot of fun for us. We looked at this as an opportunity to work with lots of communities, which was really interesting. Each one of these studies was completely different. So the program, as it came to us, was completely fresh, new, and it was really interesting to work with those communities on problem solving. What you'll see today is an animation of basically a portion of the 3D modeling study. We did basically what we call a mini feasibility study, or visioning and feasibility study for each one of these. So at the end of the study, basically the applicant got a hard copy with the 3D modeling images, as well as cost estimates, as well as recommendations. The first project, as Catherine had pointed out, is in the city of Canby. And this was a really unique opportunity on a very limited site. We got some really good input from the property owner, as well as the community, as well as city of Canby, as to what the vision might be. This is a 20,000 square foot mixed-use anchor brewery site on the property.
In Estacada, we approached an entire Main Street redevelopment looking at facades and how facades could be compatible to the long-term goals of the city for their public improvements.
This study, again, was uniquely different from the prior study. We were actually able to capitalize on a previous downtown master plan study that was done. So what we did was we actually overlaid the street improvements into a modeling, and then showed each one of the business owners basically a facade enhancement. And by doing this, we were able to convey to the community very strongly what a street enhancement looks like, how it impacts those businesses, and then look at each individual business and make recommendations that were economically viable for each one of those businesses to undertake. So basically what you see is individual facade improvements along an entire block. And what's exciting about that is that right after the study, the business owners already started implementing those changes.
And Milwaukee was one of the areas that wanted to increase on-site parking for some of their businesses.
In this particular study, there was a pre-existing use on the site. There was actually an oral surgeon center built in the 80s. Based on the new development standards for downtown Milwaukee, the building, if you touched it, became a non-conforming use or meeting of the design standards. The goal here was that we basically raised the building, created a new building to better meet the downtown design guidelines, while also meeting some of the expectations of the business owner as well as the downtown. We created a mixed-use building that basically met those design standards, as well as made improvements on off-street parking.
In Lake Oswego, we wanted to look at adaptive reuses of alleys and using alleys as parking and a contribution to existing businesses by using alleys.
In this study, it was really interesting because we actually kind of went from a planning aspect to also a building aspect. There are several things that had to occur in order for these changes to that existing use. The base use was basically a seasonal use. The business owner wanted to look at a more a 24/7 or around the year-round type of use. So we approached this as both an alley redevelopment as well as an enhancement to create opportunities for him to utilize that space year-round as an economic generator. What was interesting about that particular study also is it was eye-opening for the city of Lake Oswego. They have no design standards that directly address alleys. So in going through this process, it basically opened their eyes to the opportunities of creating backdoors that are viable.
So for the city of Sandy, they were interested in looking at bringing high-density housing and increased housing opportunities to their downtown development.
In this particular study, we looked at several options. There were 3 existing structures on this site. We looked at adaptive reuse of those structures, and it became very clear to us that the economic viability of adaptive reuse of the structures would not work nor meet all of the goals for the project. So we basically started anew. We created basically what I call a mixed-use project in the site, or a whole project, that we had retail uses along the frontage, which generally conformed with the downtown development standards, while creating also opportunities for housing, for a multifamily housing on the rear of the site. It was a really nice fit, we felt, because it became a real symbiotic relationship of the multifamily housing facing off to the single-family housing to the south, as well as creating an internal parking field then that was screened from the residences, while also supporting both uses.
Malala faces the same issues as many of our downtowns, and that's addressing long-term parking to support business growth in the downtown area. So this study was to focus on looking at long-term parking issues rather than existing needs.
In this particular study, we actually also looked at, we took the opportunity to look at some of the storefront improvements. So while solving the problem of the loss of on-street parking that was going to be taken away by some improvements by State Highway, that we were able to model and show that we could provide the parking, ample parking requirements, while also making recommendations to the business owners on small improvements could be made to the facades of their buildings in concert with this development. In going through this, we also discovered some opportunities to create some active uses on the rear property, solve some problems with serviceability of the buildings, and as well as meet some of the guidelines for off-street parking. In addition to that, this particular business owner had actually already undertaken his facade improvements program, so we were able to take his drawings, put it into our model, and show him exactly what his project would look like when it was done.
Oregon City, another exciting project looking at a historic building and how we can create densities and more uses for an existing building.
This was an interesting project, again, completely different than all the previous projects. This is a renovation project with an opportunity of adding mixed use to it. What you see here is a historic building in downtown Oregon City as it would appear after the renovation work or the enhancements happen. Basically, we showed that if you strip away all of the additions that were done to the building and return it back to its more historic roots, what that would look like. In addition to that, we looked at how we might adapt housing, high-density housing to the project. What you see here is an entirely new structure, housing over structured parking, with an opportunity for some retail to turn the corner on the rear of the site, and then the adaptive reuse of the second floor as additional housing, and reconditioning of the ground floor for a better mix of retail and commercial uses.
The city of Happy Valley has a unique opportunity to have a large piece of vacant land that can complement the Main Street and their new city center with new city hall. So this project was to look at how we can incorporate the Main Street principles within supporting a new development.
And this particular study was more what we call more of a master plan study. We really didn't get down to the true architecture like we did in the previous studies, because as you can see, it's a rather massive site. In addition to that, there are some challenges that pose themselves. There's a conservation zone, there's a seasonal stream that runs through the site, there's steep slope setbacks, and so what we're able to do is realize in a model form, show all the stakeholders, how this property could conform to the development standards and what the mix of uses might be, commercial as well as residential uses. And as you can see, again, it's an extremely large site, and it's very steeply sloped.
How large? Acres?
Acres on that one, I believe, were right around 100, but no, check that, it's less than that. The buildable acreage on that, I believe, came out to be about 15 acres. Sorry, I was thinking about a different project there.
So we are currently accepting applications. The deadline is November 1st, so we have been soliciting to our communities to apply for this year's funding. So out of these 8 projects, this is a video that we have put together that will be available on our website so that folks can look at it and see the visual. I like the 3D. I think it's a great way for us to envision how a project can look. And also the thing that was great about this and what we had asked our consultants to look at was not a pie-in-the-sky design, but a real design working with the city, working with the property owners at what is the potential for redevelopment for these projects. So that's what was exciting to us, to not only see these projects in the visioning, but then to see the property owners take that step to invest in these designs.
Questions? Commissioner Bernard?
Actually, one thing I'd love to see sometime is, and you did it actually in Oregon City, but in downtown Milwaukee, one of the big fears was the height of the buildings, 4-story versus 3-story, and does it shadow the street? You know, certainly in certain locations it would, in other locations it wouldn't. But I mean, it'd be great, of course, to look at what those impacts would be. I mean, one of the towns that I visited years ago was Alexandria, Virginia. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but I was amazed what they were able to do in that downtown and yet preserve historic areas of the downtown, just you know, a little bit east of there. But anyway, someday I'd love to see what that impact would be, because Milwaukee spent a whole bunch of money before I was mayor on a downtown plan, which said that you had to have a lot of housing downtown to make it more viable and make it safer. But one of the things that the community found difficult was the height of the buildings because of the impact on downtown. And Dark Horse Comics, which was located next to this dentist's office, you know, is a 2-story building. And then I think, well, they're all 2-story in downtown Milwaukee. But one of the problems I thought that Milwaukee faced was, you know, when the economy went, well, I'd say when Clackamas Town Center was built and everyone left downtown Milwaukee, is that they gave up. And they allowed that dentist's office, not that I don't know the dentist and that he's not the greatest oral surgeon around, but they allowed that structure to be built there, which was not compatible to the rest of the community. So, I mean, I hope people, you know, preserve vision for a downtown and not let things like that happen in the future, because I think that stalled the downtown opportunities for years. And even today, it's still challenging to move forward. So, you know, a comparison of different heights on downtown streets, because Oregon City has some pretty tall buildings, and yet it's a warm, viable community that, thanks to the hard work and the money from ODOT, downtown Oregon City has really turned a corner.
I'd like to address a couple of the questions about that quickly. Is that in the 3D modeling that you see, obviously, it's a really good tool, not only for the design team to look at when we do the design process, but for the lay people to understand what building mass does. And those are very quick things we can do in the program. And one of the other things you pointed out is solar, as far as shadowing. That's buried in the program. We can actually turn those things on, and we can model those things in real time and show you. We can position a building basically anywhere on the planet now, thanks to Google, and show what the sun angles are pretty much anywhere and what that means. And you point out actually another good point too. It's actually the downtown standards for Milwaukee really call for a 2-story building, and you saw a 1-story building there. So that would be basically a slight modification, because we looked at the viability of based on the business owner of providing additional space it just didn't seem to make sense for their economic model at that point in time.
Thanks.
Well, Jamie had,
Yep.
Commissioner Damon, then we'll go this way.
Well, thank you for this presentation. I think this is a great example of how a small investment can spur, a tremendous amount of excitement and investment in these communities. I'm really pleased that you mentioned the example of Estacada. I know that, this investment really was a catalyst for them to start looking at how to invest in their storefronts to have a more unified look. And when we look to a community like Sandy, we can really see what happens when a community gets behind a set of visionary design standards and what that means to transform, a highway town, literally. And so I think this is really great. I'm very excited about the work that you're doing, and I think this gives particularly our smaller towns, something to look forward to that they can really latch onto and make some investments that are going to carry forward. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think this is great work, and I'm delighted that we were able to do a presentation for the whole community to get to see the fruits of this project through. I think that the tool that you've presented seems like a great way for communities that are looking at pretty significant redevelopment projects to envision few different ways it could go. I'm thinking of the Stafford-Borland area. I'm thinking of the foothills area in Lake Oswego. And I'm thinking of also how affordable housing can fit into communities' redevelopment visions. And it seems like since this tool is pretty nimble and can perhaps show many different ways that communities can look, it'll be a good way for us to help our partner cities and our partner unincorporated areas think about a range of ways redevelopment could go and help them get comfortable with the idea that affordable housing can be a really positive partner and a real amenity that brings a community beauty as well as an important service and asset. So I hope we can deploy it in a lot of ways, and thank you for showing us how valuable this tool is.
Thank you. We were able, when I was at the City of Canby, I had the privilege of partnering with Greg at that time to use it for our 10-year development plan. And we applied it not only to our downtown, but to our industrial park. So we were able to take the potential redevelopment opportunities on industrial land and show what those densities would look like. So many design firms now are using this, and as was pointed out, the 3D allows you to be able to look at things like the shadow and the impact of buildings, the impact of parking. So thank you. We think it's a great tool for planning.
It is a fascinating tool. I think it really inspires a lot of people to think beyond what they have today, obviously. And so my question to you is there, I know this shadowing and these tall buildings issue is somewhat, there's a relationship between that and the street width, whereas the greater the street width, the less shadowing and more daylight that come in and less of that tunneling effect that kind of some people aren't very comfortable with that tunneling effect. Is there a magic number of width where that, I'm thinking of some other areas in the country where the streets are quite wide and that's not really a factor?
There is a relationship, but there's also not just beyond the shadowing study. There's other issues in an urban environment. As you start to create wider canyons for cars, it pulls people further apart from each other. There's all these social and economic relationships, not just solar studies. The other thing that we actually did a study for the city of Portland. We were promoting we call point towers that basically for a while there in the city of Portland when we were doing condos and lots of them, due to the zoning requirements, it kind of put a lid on certain height. And so what you saw was a lot of buildings going up that were full block width, 15 stories high. And what we were able to prove through study is that if you pulled all that density onto a quarter block and go higher with it, that the shadow impact is either does not change or is actually improved, and doesn't create these canyons of buildings that are 15 stories high. It basically creates a relief, creates also diversity of skyline, which is just as important in some respects. So it's not just solar aspects, it's all these other aspects to an urban environment. trying to think one other thing. One other aspect, when you go downtown again, think about this too, is that it's not just the sun coming from the sky that's directly shining on you, is that buildings act like reflectors. And if they're a lighter material, basically you do get light that comes in, hits another building, in some ways a good thing, in some ways a bad thing, but it reflects light back down to the street. So you don't get dark canyon effects like everybody really thinks that you get. You don't really get that.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Bernard.
I just had one other question. What about wind? I mean, I used to think that the Pearl District was really neat. And then you go down there, it's so windy, and the buildings seem to create wind or funnel the wind. And then you've got trash flying all over, which I thought was a negative about the buildings.
We actually have a program that we can put into a model, and we can demonstrate how the wind moves around buildings. And that was actually, I think, generated out of the city of Chicago. I think was one of the first cities to really embrace that, because they've got wind like no other. I mean, literally sucking people out of buildings, right, in the middle of winter. And so, yeah, we have the ability to show people, a wind study and what that means. And yeah, make no mistake, you build a building that's 4 stories high or higher, that you're going to be changing or funneling the wind characteristics in that site.
Thank you.
Well, excellent work. I think the 3D modeling is just amazing, and that you can go around, that it can go around, and you can see those little people inside the building and everything going on outside the building. It's just, I don't get it. How do they do this? But it's amazing, and it really does get you caught up in what the possibilities are when you can demonstrate it that way. So
Thank you.
very
Thank you for the
much.
opportunity.
The next presentation we have is an update on the HEAL projects through the Clackamas County Public Health Division, and I believe we have, apparently we have Cindy Becker, whose name is not down here, and Marty Frank. Marty's?
I decided
Marty
at the
Frank
last
is here.
moment.
And what?
I just decided to
Oh,
come
she
up.
just decided at
yes,
the last
that's okay. For 2 reasons.
Okay.
The first is this is really an extremely appropriate follow-up to the conversations about local communities talking about the HEAL grants, which are healthy eating, active living, which really are about local communities coming together to with projects that will really improve the health of their communities. But the other reason that I did want to come up here is to let you know that to thank Commissioner Bernard for coming to Marty's retirement party yesterday. And Marty is retiring after 12 years with the county, and this will probably be her last board meeting. And so wanted to acknowledge publicly her good work and excuse me, the attention she's brought to public health, the great work that under her leadership with H1N1, but that was kind of the public face, but there's so much that she has done for the county and for the citizens here that I just wanted to, excuse me, publicly acknowledge that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I am Marty France, the Public Health Director for the county. I'd like to introduce Philip Mason, who is our policy analyst with me today. And so we're going to go through our presentation. It is entitled, What is Public Health? And I'm going to just give you a brief overview and then focus on the HEAL grants. At the Public Health Division, our focus is really on protecting and promoting health throughout the county. And we have a list of a few of the things that we do. The birth and death certificates really are an important service to families in this county. And they really rely on being able to come in and get copies of these important documents. But it also is an example of the data, the health data that we collect and analyze and report to the county, which is an important service. The restaurant inspections, communicable disease, and immunization are really examples of how we work at protecting our citizens and residents of this county from foodborne illnesses, waterborne illness, and other communicable diseases every day. And public health nursing home visits to pregnant women and families, as well as the WIC nutrition program, are examples of the health promotion and education activities. And on the next page, we've got an example of one of those health promotion programs. And the reason we really wanted to come in today to talk to you about that is because you have allowed us to do what we consider to be a really important project to promote health throughout this county. So we wanted to report to you on it and to thank you for funding it. We're now in the third year of funding this program that provides many grants throughout the county to fund schools, neighborhoods, groups of people all over the county to do little projects. We only fund them up to $8,000 each, but it's really seed money to create something in a community that will help to provide healthy food, education about eating and nutrition, and physical activity projects. So we've been able to fund, in the first year, in 2011, we funded 13 of those projects. This page is showing some of the projects that we're currently funding in this 2012 cohort. And you can see that these are a variety of walking trails, community gardens, school activities, greenhouses sometimes, and other projects all over the county. One of the things that we require is an emphasis on sustainability. So we talk to them about how are they going to sustain this project after that initial seed funding. We also require that they put in at least 50% in kind to it, either through volunteer hours or contributions of organizations within their community. We also are looking at what kind of partnerships are they building to create this project. So these are examples of what's currently going on. Some of these have wrapped up, others are wrapping up soon. A lot of times the weather has an effect on this, so a lot of it goes on in the summer months. But you can see that these are not only promoting health, but they're going to sustain health, and they're bringing people together to focus on health in the county. We have a staff person who works with all of these projects throughout the year. She stays in touch with them by phone. She goes out and visits them to assure that they're staying on track and that they are using the money as they had intended to. And what she does then is collect information. They are required to make reports to us. And these pictures represent some of the reports and pictures that they send back to us. We're really now, as we're going into the third year of this, we have an RFP out in the community, and this is all on our county website. What we're talking to this third group about is to really collect data that we can analyze, and in order to really understand what is a successful project, what is really making a difference for a community. And our hope is to create a toolbox on the website that will be available to communities, whether they need county funds to get started or not, but just to give them some ideas of what can they do on a small scale that really will be able to support and promote the health of their residents. So that's going to be a focus for us on the next project in 2013. And with that, we just wanted to get our website up there and to encourage people to go to that, to read about the HEAL project, as well as all of the other ways in which public health promotes and protects health. With that, I would ask if there are any comments or
So are you actively seeking grants now?
Yes, we are.
And what's the deadline for those?
I
I mean, grant
believe-
applications is what I was going to say,
Yeah, I believe it's the middle of November.
middle of November.
I don't know if you know the exact. November 15th, yeah.
Okay.
All grants.
Yeah, these are the 8,000, up to $8,000
Up
grants.
to 8,000, right.
For health and nutrition-related things. And some of the ones in the past have been, you were just saying, are like community garden projects.
Community gardens has been very popular, as have walking trails. Walking trails are not going to be built with $8,000 only,
no.
but those are communities that are able to leverage a lot of additional in-kind funding.
Okay. Yes, well, we just need to encourage people who have projects that they think might qualify to get on the website and see about applying, because this can be important seed money for these small programs in the community. Yeah.
First, H1N1, even though it turned out not to be a great big deal, the county had to be prepared for it, and we had a plan all set up, and I don't know how many people ended up coming through there, but I did. But I thought the work you did was incredible. Everyone was ready for it, and thank goodness it didn't happen. And just want to say that I appreciate your 12 years of service, and you are an RN, correct? And you have your master's, and you'll be hard to be tough to replace you. But also, Clackamas County, I think it's monthly, does a networking group that comes in, and a lot of the providers are there from all these different organizations, and this information's always available, and they network, obviously, with other groups. So I think Clackamas County does a really good job in making sure that, people are invited to the programs. And they have presenters that talk about their programs. Matter of fact, that's how I found out about the Colton program, Feed the Hungry program, and some of those other groups that when we do our granting, we also look to some of those same groups to help out with our small grant program that we provide. But that networking group's just invaluable, and Clackamas County does host it, and I think it's monthly. Can't always make everyone, but I go 3 or 4 times a year. So, well, thank you for your hard work, and it's a great program. And I've also been along on a few restaurant inspections and enjoyed that, and looking at the best ones in the county, catering, usually they're catering places, and a great bunch of people. So thank you.
Questions?
I just have a comment. I'm thinking about the last presentation and this presentation, and how these are great examples of how we take a relatively small amount of money and spread it, thinly across the landscape, and how it grows, and how these communities, I'm looking at all these different projects, and you've got Sandy, Boring, Canby, Wilsonville, Colton. They're just across the county, and how, these programs are able to take these small amounts of money and double, triple, quadruple them in terms of other grants that they get or other benefits to their communities. And I think that that's so essential. It's such an important role of the county to be able to do that. And it seems like, a relatively small amount of money, and then when you add it together, it kind of feels like, it's sort of a lot of money, but it's really not, and the gains and the benefits for these communities are huge. So, this is thank you for this presentation. I'm really heartened to see how we've been able to spread it across our communities, across Clackamas County, and how so many, small, important programs were able to benefit. So that's fantastic, and we will miss you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the support for public health through the years. It's very heartening to see our Board of County Commissioners, which is also our Board of Health, really acknowledging the need for supporting health throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, I just want to say congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
And just wanted to point out to folks, by virtue of going to the county college program, I've learned that, certain things are mandated by state law, and the service you provide is one of those services, or public health is a mandated service in the state of Oregon for counties to implement. So, and whether it's H1N1 or anything else, people know that, the county has a role in that, and I appreciate you being there for that and the great work you all do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would follow up on that. Coming from a municipal background as a former mayor, public health is something municipalities generally do very little of. And we generally refer all the issues related to public health to the county. And the county is in the lead on public health, community health, and mental health. So it was a big change for me coming to the county because it's a set of agendas that I had not been familiar with before, and I've been very impressed with how the county handles public health and community health. So thank you very much for your service. It's been great working with you. And was your other person going to say something? No.
Well, I would just say on behalf of all our staff, we're going to really miss Marty, but are excited about getting a new director on board and working with the board moving forward and under Cindy's leadership. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty, very much.
And that brings us to citizen communication. This portion of citizen communication will proceed for a half an hour. If we're unable to hear everyone who has signed up to speak during this time, we'll continue citizen communication when the other business items are finished, because we have 2 public hearings before us here today. But citizen communication is an opportunity to address the board on items that are not on the agenda or items that are on the agenda but not scheduled for public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if it's something that you need a response to, it's helpful if you also submit it in writing so that we can be sure to have someone get back to you at some point. So the first 2 cards I have are Kevin Phillips and Barbara Kemper. Yeah, and you can come up and take turns. And then on deck, I have Naomi Angeter and Yvonne Lazarus. Will be the next 2. So.
Morning, Commissioners. My name's Kevin Phillips. I reside in Beaver Creek, Oregon. This is my 8th opportunity to talk about fines with you. Chair Lehan just mentioned if you need a response, you might need to put it in writing. That's become very apparent to me, having to come up here 8 times. So I will take that suggestion and I will put my concerns in writing. But what dovetails with that is I have some requests today of you. I'm going to challenge you to try and be open-minded, to be willing, and to be honest. It may be difficult for some of you because I find it's difficult for me as I travel my path daily. I've been here 8 times. Have you been listening? Jamie Damon, have you been listening to me? I would like a response to that, either during this hearing or in writing, over the phone, however you choose. Commissioner Jim Bernard, been here 8 times. Are you listening? Are you actively listening? You know, with communication, it's implied that both parties are willing. Are you willing to try something different? You know, I was told that insanity is repeating the same mistakes over and over again and expecting a different result. Are you willing to try a new result? Look for a solution? Chair Lehan, I've been here 8 times. I've talked my entire 3 minutes each time. I've tried a different tack each time. I've argued the facts. I've argued the law. And I have come here sometimes and just argued. Are you listening? Are you willing to try and have an open mind, have some patience, some perseverance, and get back to me either in writing, in person, on the phone, or some other way that you are able to communicate to me that you are listening actively? Thank you. Ann Leninger, Commissioner, I've been here 8 times. Are you listening? Are you actually absorbing what's being said or suggested? What have you done to further that process? Have you talked to county council about the issue? Have you done your own independent legal research? I know you're a learned lawyer and probably a
Okay,
fine one.
You're past
But
your
I
3
haven't
minutes.
seen any of that. Are you willing to get back to me with a response?
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming in. I'm going to jump in if that's all right, because you're done with the 3 minutes.
According to you, I am. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
You go ahead and finish your thought. I was going to respond because I know that you're asking me to respond.
I'll defer to you.
Well, I appreciate your coming in, and I think you actually frame your comments in a gracious way, and I can tell you're frustrated. My understanding from the communication that we had at the last meeting, well, one, I think you absolutely should get a response. Your assertion, as I understand it, is that the way in which the county has dealt with the process for establishing fines and fees, at least one prong of that you feel like is inconsistent with state law. At our last meeting, I believe our county council said that his understanding of law is that it's not inconsistent. So while I know that you don't agree with that position, or it sounds like you don't agree with that position, I feel like our county council did try to respond to the assertion that you've made, and he said, you know, his understanding of the law is different from your understanding of the law. That said, and it may be that in fact, you know, the two of you have different understandings of what the legal requirements are, but I think since you've come here a lot of times and you've clearly not felt like your question has gotten the kind of response you need, I would really love for our county administration to, one, tell me what we've done in response to this gentleman's comments, and perhaps we need to write him a letter that you know sets forth what Mr. Madcore was saying, because or perhaps Mr. Sedaris is ready to give a response, because certainly, you know, whether or not you get the answer you want, I would like you to
Let me
feel you're
start
being
with a
heard.
quick response, and then perhaps Mr. Sedaris can continue. I think Mr. Phillips came here several weeks ago, and 8 seems like a fair number to me. I'm not going to argue that. And he had 2 concerns. One was about how we move forward with fees, and the other was about fines. And I think there's been an agreement reached on the fee situation, if I'm right. So we've got that put aside. The remainder is how we process and move forward with fines. And I think there's an honest difference of opinion between the county counsel's office and Mr. Phillips here. And I know in talking with the county council, he's ready, willing, and able to continue his discussions with Mr. Phillips, maybe not in this forum, but you know, one-on-one or wherever he can. So that's where I think it stands. Also, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago to the board, I've made a little tagline to my budget notes when we move forward in budgeting to mention this issue to the board and see if the board would like to change course and adopt fines by ordinance, at least new ones, instead of resolution. So I think that's on my to-do list as well. With that, let me see if Scott Sedaris has anything to add to that.
Thank you. I'm Scott Sedaris, one of your councils, not the county council. Yes, my understanding is, number one, this dialogue started out on the subject of fees and fines, and now we're on the subject of fines, and so we've narrowed our focus. Number two, we recognize that the area of fines is an area for focus. Number three, this is not a problem that we solve in the blink of an eye. By that I mean a fine is a sanction for doing a behavior that the county does not believe is appropriate, such as parking in a dangerous zone. There's a fine imposed for that. Our ordinance says, for example, at 701050, that fines shall be set by resolution. When we make a change setting fines by ordinance, we have to change a series of sections of our ordinance, various chapters. That's a complicated process. As you'll see later in this proceeding, it takes a minimum of 2 weeks to do this. I have a great deal of respect for the integrity of Mr. Phillips and his research. I will take personal responsibility for giving him the answers he requires.
And I would just add that we have been looking at this, but it is something generally that comes up once a year. So we're looking at it in the time frame of we might make some changes to the procedures that have been in place for, I don't know, way before we got here. But it wouldn't be until the issue comes up again, because we don't do it. It's not something we do every month or two. It's once a year. So I don't know when it comes up again, September or something.
It actually comes up in late February, early March. We have a study session where any changes are proposed, and the board weighs on them so that we can then prepare them in the budgets that are developed for the coming
And I
fiscal
know we
year.
have had discussions about a new fine or fee maybe maybe we should change the procedure and do that by ordinance, but it wouldn't be until, wouldn't be something we're taking action on until that rolls around, February, March. So, yeah.
I just want to express, I have sat down, Mr. Phillips brought the fines issue to me, and I sat down with Mr. Phillips, and he showed me the state statute. I've read it. I recently sat with Mr. Madcore, legal counsel for the county, and he has indicated, somewhat similar to what Mr. Sedaris has stated, that there are some procedural changes, and I suspect that next year, mid-year or earlier, that will indeed be adopting fines by ordinance. But it's not going to, as Mr. Sedaris explained, it won't be sudden because it won't be quick, but it will, I suspect it will occur.
Now, I'm going to move on to the second person so we don't get too far behind.
I just want to thank you for your attention to this matter. I've been working on it for 12 years. Thank you.
Barbara Kemper.
Hi. My name is Barbara Kemper, and I'm currently a commissioner at the Clackamas River Water District. I'm speaking today strictly for myself, not as a commissioner, not representing the district. I want to thank the Board of County Commissioners for agreeing to address the issues that we have with our board of not having enough commissioners to operate properly, being at a deadlock. And I appreciate contact with Commissioner Bernard and Commissioner Savas in this respect. Am I speaking loud enough?
No.
Okay.
Perfect.
I've already tendered my intent to resign from the board effective the 31st of October. And I intend to fulfill that intent once I'm assured that there's an adequate group of candidates for appointment to the empty positions, and that they will be appointed all at one time, to take office all at the same time, because I believe that's important with our particular situation. The big problem at this point is whether we can obtain insurance. And the special districts have said very adamantly that they will not issue insurance with our current existing board. Mike Cardwell already resigned. Cammie and I both have announced our intent to resign. I'm here today to make a public plea to the remaining commissioners, Commissioner Holloway and Commissioner Sterling, to also resign so that CRW can go forward with a brand new board that can look at things and handle things in a cooperative manner. As I say, the big problem is the insurance. I spoke this morning with our insurance agent, and he said that just late yesterday he got word from one group that he was hopeful might possibly take us on, and they're water specialists, and they've withdrawn. The main thing is the insurance for board members and officers, but also for employment issues. I understand that without these issues, that CRW has one of the best records in the state. But with those issues, we're essentially uninsurable. So just, again, a public plea for Commissioners Holloway and Sterling to join us in resigning. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was kind of looking for Gary Schmidt, but can we recap what the process is right now in case people are
Yes,
interested, or you have it,
we
interested in applying? in case people are
Very briefly, we have a process that we take applications through today, and I think the latest number we had were 12 bona fide applications.
Wow.
Oh, it's right here.
And we're taking them through what date?
5 o'clock today.
Today.
Okay.
Today, and then we'll have a process of a committee that will vet them out and make recommendations to the board on November 6th, I believe it is, and we would, and that's at a Tuesday study session, and on Thursday, hopefully the board could appoint, which would be the morning, November 6th, November 8th, before the next CRW meeting, which is that evening.
So we do have a good group of candidates who have submitted applications. Anyone else who wanted to submit an application, you can do so till 5 o'clock today. And then we have a selection committee in place that is experienced in water issues and special districts. And so it will not be this board doing that selection process, and we'll be relying on their advice. And Commissioner Bernard, you had something else you want to say? Or?
Well, I first thing, I appreciate you being available to talk by phone even when you were out of the state. And we talk quite often, and we have been working very hard to reach out. But one of the things that people need to know should they wish to apply, they actually must get their water bill from the district and live in the district. So not just anyone can apply, and there's 80,000 people, right? Or is that the population of the district or the households? No, it's got to be population.
That's the population.
Yeah,
I
there's
believe.
80,000 people, so there's lots of opportunities for people to get involved. And we did pass a resolution, which I believe you saw, suggesting that the best solution is for all board members to resign. Otherwise, it is going to be very challenging, if not impossible, to get insurance. So I think the citizens and the ratepayers in that area ought to be concerned about that and try and resolve the situation as soon as possible. The folks we will appoint will have to run for that position if they're interested. But it is challenging to volunteer for a board that's insurance will expire at the end of the year. And so we're going to brief some of those folks about the situation so they understand that, if by the end of the year they don't secure insurance, they certainly have the option to resign. And then we probably are back to the same issue, but hopefully the appointment of these three people, Larry Soa being one of those, a former county commissioner, we can resolve some of these problems. Larry Soa is a man who stands on his own 2 feet and makes decisions based on the true information, and I think will be a good member of that board. So thank you for your service, your years of service to the Water District and the challenges I know you have faced, and for stepping up and doing the what I think is a heroic thing by resigning in the hopes of resolving CRW's
I certainly hope so.
problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, our first two items took quite a bit more than 3 minutes, but we will try to move along here. Naomi Angier, and Yvonne Lazarus.
I'll go ahead and start because I need to get going. Sure. So I'm Naomi Anger, and I live in Milwaukee on Johnson Road. And the reason I came today is on Thursday night I was watching the Clackamas County public part of the meeting, and I was rather appalled at a lot of the people who came up and spoke. I didn't feel they were very respectful, and I didn't agree with their views, and those were the only people who came. And there were a lot of people that were anti-light rail and were trying to rail against the commission for obtaining money for the light rail. And I just want to say that I'm here representing all those other people who didn't come, who support light rail, and I think there's a lot of them. And in spite of that very confusing measure, which I think only passed because it was very confusing and people didn't know how to vote or what it meant, and people usually will vote for things like that. And Holloway, actually, who has been sort of the problem on the water board, came up and started railing on you about not appointing somebody to the commission, which I thought was really kind of odd since she's been part of the problem. So I just want to let you know there are those of us out there. They may not show up at all the meetings, but they support us, support good land use planning, they support schools, they support libraries, they support being part of the relationship with Portland, and we're out there, and I hope there won't be another meeting where all you get is the other side. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Yvonne Lazarus. The first thing that I want to say is that I'm here to speak strictly for myself. I want everybody to know that I'm going to take responsibility for this, and if you have something ugly to say, direct it to me. You can call the commission. They have my phone number. A neighbor of mine came over last weekend, and because I've been busy, I don't have the TV on and a lot of other things. I did not realize there was signs put out, and I was at the meeting that this gentleman, Dave Adams, spoke about being bullied. Well, he went on television and he has been putting out these signs, which I think is extremely ugly because it had nothing to do with bullying at all. When you go on the website, it's a campaign smear. I brought a sign. Okay. To me, along with whoever this was, who has been graffitiing Tootie Smith's and John Ludlow's signs, it's very ugly. It doesn't belong in Clackamas County. And I know that most of us who agree to disagree, and you all know up there that I don't agree with you, but you have a right to disagree with me. That doesn't mean I get to go out and smear your signs or do ugly things like that. Please, everybody go and vote. And do your own research, because I've done a lot of research. This time around, I've done a lot of research. And I can tell you personally, John Ludlow is not a bully. You may not like things about him, or there's things I don't like about the other side either. But I don't call them bullies. Bully is a real ugly word. And it does real ugly things. Thank you.
Okay. The next two I have are Les Poole and Mariana Moore. And then on deck I have Libby Wentz and Mac Woods.
Good morning, Les Poole, Oak Grove. Sometimes you come up here and you say, where do I start? After about a minute, you got 2 minutes left. I'll start by saying that in front of you is a photo of what the trolley trail looks like. As you all know, I was here not 8 times or 18 times. I would probably say 35 times. Every time that I spoke about what was being done south of Milwaukee in order to do a low-budget attempt to extend the end of light rail that Commissioner Bernard, former mayor, and the people in Milwaukee did not want in their community, after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, planning and attempting to bring light rail to Milwaukee. As the traffic reality, the crime reality, and the other negatives have grown with light rail, many attempts have been made to dump, and I use the word dump, the end of the line beyond Lake Road. The first one was a fraud where Kellogg Lake Park was going to be sacrificed. We were going to, for the good of the fish in the neighborhood, we were going to park a 6-story or 5-story parking garage and dump the end of the line at a place that we later supposedly found out was a park. You can bet there's ample evidence in the record that some of the individuals involved knew it was a park. Appalling. After that disaster, we got a dotted line across Kellogg Lake and up the trolley trail to Park Avenue. I listened to people come in here over and over and over and talk about support for light rail and planning and all these other neat little buzzwords. I've got 30+ years in planning. I'm not against transit. I'm not against the idea of some rail lines, but the way this has been handled has been atrocious. And at $200 million a mile, we're now going to somehow provide parking for a whopping 600 cars. This thing, on any standard, is a disaster. And the refusal by Chair Lehan and others to allow a vote on the public is a glaring, glaring indication of just what's wrong with this. I noticed in the literature that's going around for some candidates who are running, who are financed by the light rail planning cabal, as they're often called, I noticed that they're not mentioned. And there's no articles in the Oregonian about where Chair Lehan and Jamie Damon, where are you getting your campaign financing? I'm asking that question because hopefully the public will ask. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
And Mariana Moore from Gladstone. I was impressed that you actually answered a couple of the people today. One of the things that I missed, though, was when you had the two presentations, that things came up in that I would have liked to have spoken to, and I hope you'll give me a minute extra for that. Because I'm from Gladstone. Gladstone wasn't one of the ones that you're supporting, apparently. And I was wondering how, if you've seen, at least I know Jamie's seen our downtown, it desperately needs some of this revitalization. And there was a mention of November 1st. I don't know if we could still get in on some of this or not. But the Save Gladstone group has been wanting to save Gladstone. And it's not just the library, although the library at this time, because it's on the ballot and we're hoping that people will look at it and say, this is not the place for a library. The other presentation was talking about walking trails. This is a nature trail through a rocky site away from downtown Gladstone, and it's not the proper place for a library. And so those are issues from what was presented here, and I'd like to know how you feel about those two things. What I was asked to do today was to read something from Jim Sanders, who wasn't able to be here today. And a letter came in, and I couldn't get my computer to print it off. But anyway, I'll just read what I have. He sent a letter that contained the following points. He would be here if he could. He's concerned about the shenanigans that continue here. You watched the video from 2 weeks ago where John Ludlow, candidate for county chair, spoke about campaign signs being destroyed. Jim was appalled at Chair Lehan not taking the high road. She stated something like, a problem that happens to her. She, as chair, should have implored those responsible to please stop the expensive illegal activity. Mr. Sanders watched Commissioner Jim Bernard claim that he doesn't own a white hoodie, so it couldn't be me. Mr. Sanders expressed that when Jim is no longer a commissioner, the county will be better off. He closed by noting that nowhere in Chair Lehan's or Jamie Damon's campaign literature is light rail support mentioned. Expect to have the entire letter presented soon. Along with that, I understand that Milwaukee just approved new standards. As the early simulation showed, Jim Bernard's property is being rezoned at this time for high-value mixed-use development. Isn't that amazing? One fall for the former mayor. Have a little flyer from Gladstone. This is what we're comparing the library plan to, and we asked people in Gladstone to consider voting no against it. And if you have any comments on what I ask, I'd be glad to hear them.
Okay, we'll ask, I think that's, I'll just ask Catherine to come up and say how those cities were selected, that we looked at the 8 cities or whatever it was that we
Thank you
did.
for the opportunity to respond. We did outreach to every community in Clackamas County, both by email, sending out our application, and calling the city representatives for their downtown on the phone. At this time, Gladstone has declined, saying they did not have a project that they wanted to apply for.
So it was initiated by the cities themselves. I noticed Wilsonville didn't appear in there either. So it just depends what individual cities are, what their status is.
Our
at
city
the
council
time.
refused to go into this.
Well, they may not have had a project they thought was that was right for the moment.
They had a
another city did.
citizens plan a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's still on file. And what about the November 1st? Is there still opportunity for them to get in on
Yes, and we
anything?
are happy to take an application from Gladstone. We have reached out and are happy to entertain an application.
Good.
Okay.
And how much money is involved with that?
It's a $5,000 design grant, which means we provide $5,000 worth of design to each community. There's no cost to the community.
Okay, and then you could put up a 3D thing on
Yes.
the city of Gladstone?
Yes, for the project that is submitted.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's not the whole town. The next two I have are Libby Wentz and Mac Woods.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to communicate. My name's Libby Wentz, and I'm in Gladstone, and I appreciate the explanation about the Gladstone, why it wasn't included, and I think both Mariana and I understood why Gladstone wasn't included, that they weren't interested, because Gladstone has a history of not making good decisions, and that, I guess, now makes me a bully to Gladstone, too. I love Gladstone. I've lived in Gladstone for 16 years. I think that it was God's grace that landed us in Gladstone when we moved here from South Florida. That being said, listening to the 3D Downtown Projects presentation was interesting and inspiring. Too bad the city of Gladstone was not involved with this project to get a bigger vision of how urban renewal money can and should be used, instead of trying to cover expenses for an unnecessary community center building / library outside our downtown area. People are confusing the county's involvement in the Gladstone Oak Grove Library and the libraries in Happy Valley and Lake Oswego. They're two separate, or three, I guess. I don't know Lake Oswego's at all. But Happy Valley got a sweet deal, and once again, Gladstone failed to pick up the ball like they apparently did with the 3D downtown projects. The proposed community center / library is something our myopic planners just cannot look at clearly. It's a gift from Clackamas County, they keep saying, a gift that we cannot, it's a gift we can't afford though. The operational expenses have not been addressed beyond planning to use urban renewal money to make ends meet. It's like the county offering Gladstone a nearly free Great Dane puppy. Gladstone wants it so badly they can't acknowledge the true expenses that they're going to have, that they'll end up having. They'll have vet bills, they'll have food bills, and it'll cost a lot more than the little puppy they've been feeding so far. Improving the trolley trail through our city and the buildings along its path down Portland Avenue would be a much better use of our limited dollars, which is why Gladstone residents need to stop the Trojan horse being misled as a new library for us and vote no on 3-413. In addition, to show that we're not a cabal here and we don't go along, I thought that was great. Mariana brought that up, and I thought it was great that the signs were addressed, but there was an article in the Clackamas Review, the same bully stuff, which is apparently paid for by Clackamas Citizens for Prosperity, which is a nonprofit entity that was just made August of this year by Peter Toll. So that is definitely from someone within the county that was just designed to put up the bully signs. And thank you so much for this time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Amazing, Clackamas County Commissioners and the good people out there in the county. We're here to represent you. A few of us that are not working and punching a clock can come here and speak on your behalf. And thank you for all your phone calls to me for the compliments you give. Here we are today with a dozen days before we will see the biggest change than ever before with the election in this great nation, state, and also here in Clackamas County. I come to my first meeting here about 2 years ago, and many other public property owners have done likewise. To be able to speak for only 3 short minutes for the betterment of all in Clackamas County on the subject of cost to we, the people. A few of us come to your public meetings because we care about the working people in this county that cannot come. You seem to ignore us when you vote on things like the vehicle tax to pay for a bridge in Multnomah County, the light rail that costs millions of dollars in this down economy, and the tree bill created by Mr. Bob Austin 2 years ago, and you voted it in after he was voted out. Well, duh. You won't be able to ignore our vote in 12 days. Just last week, we had some very wonderful young folks speaking on the trolley trail, and some of you commented thereafter. And then one of you commented about them growing up and having power later in life as if to control others like a political position. Let me be the first to explain it is not about power, as some of you think. It's all about honesty, truthfulness, integrity, respect for the people you're paid to represent, and certainly not power to control the people, as some politicians think. You might want to listen to your comments last week and tell us who made that comment, Mr. Bernard. Recently, I invited you to walk across the patio here to the right of me. A turtle could make it in 5 minutes to verify who truly owns 6 of the 8 tax lots on Block 37 in less than 50 foot from where the proposed rail will come through. At the very least, you other 4 commissioners should look at the records yourself right over there, 5 minutes, to verify the truth from me, whether I'm lying or not. And I told you I'd be the first one to apologize to the public if I'm lying. And Mr. Bernard, you turned down my offer to invite you over to verify it, and the rest of you. Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Matt Carroll also, you should do the same as the legal counsel. This would truly let the people know if Mr. Bernard has a personal financial dog in the fight on light rail. Thank you for your time, and
Okay.
don't forget to vote, public.
We're past our 30 minutes, but I only have one card, and that's for Cindy, so Lewis Wolfram, so we'll do that one last one and then go on to our public hearing.
To the public, vote.
Thank you, Chair Lehan. I appreciate you making the time for me to speak today. The reason I wanted to come up and address you today has to do with the process you're going through to select people to then be, I assume, reviewed by the board and a final selection being made after your committee meets to make preliminary selections. At least that's the gist that I got from what was said. My question was, is this process a printed process and available to the public? And if so, where is it located so that we can follow it? Secondly, will the process of them interviewing those people that are being put in front or asked to be put in as commissioners, is that process going to be an open public process, or is it going to be private interviews? The reason I ask that is that currently we have 2 commissioners on the board. Those commissioners represent the city or unincorporated Milwaukee. I don't know where these other folks are coming from within the water district, but I would ask that your selection committee consider that consider that we have representation spread out from Oregon City through unincorporated Milwaukee middle area, not just representation from the north end of the water district. I think it's really important that we get coverage of the entire water district. Also, I don't know if Commissioner Kemper mentioned, but part of the reason that we're having problems with the insurance, especially in the employment area, is that there is a BOLI complaint lodged against CRW and 2 individual commissioners. Those commissioners are the 2 commissioners that currently remain on the board. I'm not sure if they think that I'm not sure if the BOLI complaint will go away should those commissioners step away from the board. But I do know that it might help with our insurance should they step away from the board. I say "are" because as a ratepayer, I'm part of that, the CRW folks that need to be protected from the misconduct of certain commissioners. There has been a report filed, an investigation done, and a report filed. And there is a commissioner that's remaining on the board who seems to have committed malfeasance. I would encourage the CRW folks to look, people that get CRW water, to look at that report on CRW's board. And I would ask that folks calm down a little bit out here. This is an election year. Things happen out there. I had a sign that, like Ms. Libby had brought up, that had been placed on my neighbor's yard. And I didn't know how it got there or if it was my neighbor that put it up. But it got taken down in the middle of the night. And a couple of the signs that I had in my yard, street sign, had gotten destroyed in the process. Calm down. We're neighbors. We need to respect each other's views, and all of us need to vote this year. It's a very important election.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll have Gary Schmidt come up and just explain the selection process briefly, and we'll on this.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. This is an accelerated process, which we're finalizing the details today. We will do a press release and outreach to everyone who's interested to know what the details are, but what I can tell you now, there will be a citizen selection committee panel who will review the applications and interview all the candidates. This will occur next Thursday, November 1st, starting at 3 p.m. in the Development Services Building, room 118. It is open to the public. Anyone may come and watch and witness the interviews. The panel will do deliberations at the end of that day, And then, as Steve mentioned earlier, on Tuesday, November 6th, they will come before you at a study session to present their recommendations for your discussion and decision, which will then be finalized at the business meeting on Thursday, November 8th. So there will be a public process open to anyone who wishes to participate, but we'll have all the details out later today or first thing Monday confirming this.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will go on to our public hearings. The first item is the second reading of ordinance number 10-2012, amending Chapter 11.03 of the Transportation System Development Charge Ordinance to target economic development incentives and improve program administration. Now, that's a long title. But we have Deirdre Landon here from DTD, which is Department of Transportation and Development, and Scott Sedaris from County Council, who will explain this a little bit better, more detail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had the first reading on October 11th. On that occasion, we did have 2 questions asked during the public commentary part of it. I believe the best way to proceed is to ask Ms. Landon to directly address those 2 questions with more detail than we were able to provide at the October 11th hearing, and then provide other information that may be of interest to the commissioners and the public.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. The 2 questions that were asked about the ordinance amendments that are being brought forward. The first question was, there were a number of questions involved in it, but it was asking, how do we get to the information that would tell us how many vehicle trips will be taken off the road with a mixed use or the proximity to transit? And we discussed it a little, but it is an estimate, it's a forecast based on what's being proposed. It's based on averages, not just in the Pacific Northwest, because they did ask whether we considered the climate of the Northwest, because we do get a lot of rain. And while the Pacific Northwest is one of the areas included, it's a nationwide model. One of the things we definitely did consider is the fact that you don't want to be providing a reduction in any way for somebody that's more than about a half a mile from the transit, because it's pretty unlikely at that point that they're going to be walking. And so we do have some measurements built into the ordinance language that would take care of that. And we also have some links to the different websites and stuff. We could certainly provide this to the public if anybody were interested in going and getting more information about the models that were used. There was also a question about the cost of the technical study, who paid for that, where that revenue came from. Because what we did is we actually, when we set out about 2 years ago to do the ordinance amendments, we knew that we wanted to look at mixed-use development and the proximity to bus lines, how close it is to transit, because we know that it does reduce some vehicle trips. What we didn't know is, in Clackamas County, what would be reasonable. We know maybe, there's other areas that maybe have developed their transit systems a little bit more, and so they might have more data on that, but we did have to do a second really small contract to figure out what's reasonable in Clackamas County so that when we put these tables together, we knew that it was something feasible. So it actually ended up being a $4,000 technical study that looked at developments within Clackamas County and the City of Happy Valley District. And actually, the City of Happy Valley ended up paying for that study for us because they were the partner with us on these ordinance amendments. So I think that addresses the 2 questions that were raised at the last meeting.
Any other questions on this item?
I just want to renew my concern that I had last time. It really wasn't a question, but was more of a concern that it just seemed not to really have a mechanism that should some of the trip savings or some of the uses not be realized, that in turn we would perhaps experience traffic conditions greater than anticipated and yet not have any means of recovering from those if there, again, is not enough residential and a higher commercial use and so forth, so that some of these, maybe if a food establishment or adequate food establishments don't exist, that people will be traveling outside. For example, if there's only one food place, well, it's human nature that people don't like to eat the same food for dinner or lunch or breakfast every day of the year, so they're bound to travel outside the area. So my concern is that the viability of all of those options, and that human nature says that we're not going to go to the same place or maybe a limited, just from that standpoint alone. So in general, that just serves as one example. My concern is just the recovery should a greater transportation project be required to bring in capacity that we didn't recover or ever receive adequate funds for.
I would like to respond if I can, and I'd like to apologize for not responding more clearly and concisely last time. I was very sick a couple weeks ago, and I'm still getting over it, so please bear with me. But we will have a mechanism to capture the additional trips if the whole purpose of having the development agreement in place, if a developer wants to take advantage of these discounts, is that if the development does not realize the way they anticipate it, because obviously it's a guess. You go out there, you build, you hope you're gonna get the type of users that you've set out to get. If for some reason that's not realized and you end up with all medical office or something else and you don't get that mix of users, we will have a mechanism to capture that difference. And that's the whole reason we would have the development agreement in place. So we will definitely have that opportunity.
Commissioner Bernard.
And just want to be clear, you're not guessing. There is a manual that actually addresses traffic impacts of certain types of businesses, sizes of buildings, number of apartments and all those. It's just not a guess.
Absolutely. There's the Institute of Transportation Engineers have done nationwide studies. It is, again, it's all averages across the U.S. It's the best anybody can do without having specific trip data to a particular user, and you're not going to get that till after it's built. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. It's scientific guesses. There are models out there that are going to average it out, but it is an average, and that's information that's available. So,
yeah, it's like a single family home is a generator of 10 trips. Is that right?
Yep.
10 trips a day. Now, that seemed always very high to me, but until I lived next door to a family that had two teenagers, who were two teenage drivers, and then I think they had 40 trips a day. They were constantly in, out, in, out, in, out. But so obviously many households have fewer than 10 trips a day, and some households have more than 10 trips a day, but that's the average that a single-family house gets assigned.
And as a single-car household, I mean, one thing to keep in mind is it's an average of 10 trips a day. However, each time you come to your home and then leave your home, that's 2 trips. And that's a little confusing sometimes, and you have to get into the definitions, and that's way too technical for this discussion. But when you're looking at the average and you understand that, it's a wide variety.
So of course, when you're setting numbers like that for businesses and industry across a huge range of types and sizes, you have to go by the averages, and sometimes it's right on, sometimes it's off, too high, too low. Any other questions on this? No. Well, then I would open the public hearing, I guess, and ask if anyone would like to speak on ordinance number 10-2012, amending chapter 11.03.
Les Pooligan, Oak Grove. I gave my resume the first time I spoke. The weather does affect transit use. Fuel prices affect transit use. There's an interesting thing I've been studying, and Chair Lehan's comments about the teenagers coming and going really brought it to my mind. A lot of the driving that goes on is unnecessary. Doesn't matter how old you are now. Think back when you were a teenager and you had a car. If you had enough money for gas, you were out running around. If you look at the decrease in traffic in 2009 and 10 in a bad economy, and a very small overall increase in transit use, what you find is that when people are economically challenged, they stay home a heck of a lot more. And so somewhere in this equation, those realities are probably overlooked. It's real easy to overlook something that's so obvious. But if you talk to folks and ask them, how much driving are you doing? Are you finally carpooling? Are you planning your trips rather than making 4 or 5 a day? You'll find more and more folks are doing that. Speaking of trips, I came here today, and when I'm done, I'm going home. To me, that's a trip. But when it comes to counting ridership on light rail, or when it comes to making proposals, bigger numbers sound better. So you could tell me that I've made a trip here, and then I'm going to make a trip home. And on paper, that might sound good, but it's really one trip. The only other thought I have briefly is, and this is something that a planner, a commercial developer shared with me, and that is, what are the incentives here? What are these discounts? You know, I'm not against some reasonable subsidy from time to time, but this ordinance is probably going to invite probably some excessive discounting and an excessive focus in order to make transit and transit-oriented development work. And all that money will come from somewhere. And with the limited use of urban renewal you now face, where does the urban renewal money come from? It's all coming from the same basic place. So I think we're in a fiscal reality where offering discounts and incentives to developers is going to turn into something that goes far beyond what's probably being intended, unless there's some reasonable limitations, and unless the public really knows how much of our tax money are you going to be providing for developers to get discounts and tax deferrals. It's a big question. Thanks for your time.
Okay, anyone else who wants to speak on this?
Yeah, Mariana Moore. I've spoken before today. My problem is, well, I used to work downtown Portland, and I took the bus sometimes, but usually in time since then, where I don't have to go back and forth to work, so it's a different thing than many of the people. If you have a household with 4 people, there may be 1 or 2 that are going to work and back every day, but probably not all of them. When you ride the light rail, you get on at a station, like I've ridden it from the town center to go downtown. What's obvious is that they don't stop along the way where you can get off and do things and get back on or anything. They stop at park and rides. And until you get from town center to down to Lloyd Center, there's hardly anything that you would stop to get off for. The people that ride it have to drive the car to get to it. And so you're not really taking cars off the road. You may take some of their distance off the road, but you're not taking cars off the road because they don't go where the people are. And also what they've talked about and what I've done for years, you make one trip out, you go to the grocery store, you plan your doctor's appointment, you do whatever you have to do in one trip. So you make many stops when you take your car out. If you're riding light rail, that eliminates all that sort of thing. It's just so impractical to think of building this permanent one way to get to one place and back when people in this area especially, I don't see how you can compare the Northwest and this rural, partly rural area to New York or Boston or anywhere else in the country. Every place is unique. And I think that you're taking statistics nationwide is absolutely useless. And I think all of this should be reconsidered. Thank you for your time.
Okay, anyone else would like to comment on this ordinance, which is amending the Clackamas County Code? Not seeing anyone, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion to read this ordinance by title only.
Madam Chair, I move we read ordinance number 10-2012, amending Chapter 11.03 of Clackamas County Code, Transportation System Development Charge Ordinance by title only.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Leininger that we read this ordinance by title only. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0 and is unanimous, and I will ask the clerk to read the ordinance by title only.
Okay, ordinance number 10-2012, an ordinance amending chapter 11.03, Transportation System Development Charge of the Clackamas County Code.
Then I would ask for a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Madam Chair, I move we adopt ordinance number 10-2012, amending Chapter 11.03 of Clackamas County Code, Transportation System Development Charge Ordinance to target economic development incentives and improve program administration.
And I second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Damon that we adopt ordinance number 10-2012, amending Chapter 11.03 of the Clackamas County Code. Is there further discussion? No? Then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0 and is unanimous. And thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And that brings us to the second public hearing, which is the first reading of an ordinance amending Title 8 of the Clackamas County Code by adopting Chapter 8.08, Film and Media Production, and establishing a uniform permit process, fees, and guidelines. And we have Catherine Comer from Business.
Nope.
Nope,
No,
not really.
but
We have Jamie
Jamie.
Junk from Business and Economic Development, and Catherine Comer sitting on the sideline, and Scott Sedaris from County Council.
Commissioners, ordinarily, the reach of our ordinances stop at the county's borders, but on this particular occasion, the ordinance now before you is part of extending Clackamas County throughout the world, and we will be doing it as part of the entertainment industry. So to speak with more particular detail on this point, as we have our first reading and presentation of this ordinance, Ms. Jonk is available.
Thank you, Scott. Madam Chair and Commission, thank you for the opportunity to come and share this ordinance with you today. As we've discussed previously, the Clackamas County Film and Media Production Program is a new initiative underway by the Clackamas County Business and Economic Development Department. We created this particular industry to look at the jobs and opportunities that exist in Clackamas County, the region, and the state. This particular creative class is an emerging cluster generating almost 5,000 direct jobs in Clackamas County, which is outstanding, and it contributes over $2 million to the annual GDP. So it's really a significant opportunity for our county. 200 million. Did I say 2 million again? 200 million to the GDP. As we've been conducting our outreach and getting to know those businesses and industries in this creative class, we've learned that we've lost some opportunities to film and produce films in Clackamas County due to a lack of a uniform filming process. We really don't have anything in place currently that allows for a single fee process and a single permitting process. Therefore, Business and Economic Development staff has been working with our county parks, our county council, the film and media industry, and our local jurisdictions on developing this county film and media ordinance, as well as uniform film and permit application, fees and guidelines. We're hoping this ordinance will create a process in which Clackamas County will institute a filming permit application, as well as establishing guidelines and fees for use of county parks and public properties in the unincorporated area. Further, this film and media ordinance will serve as a model that cities throughout Clackamas County will be encouraged to adopt in order to promote that uniformed filming process. And the model ordinance, though, is not intended to address the regulations for local jurisdictions. They will be setting those fees and regulations on their own, but provide that general sense of film friendliness and a unified process countywide. Scott?
Questions about this item? No. Well, then, I will open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to speak on ordinance number 10-2012, amending Title 8 of the Clackamas County Code. Seeing no one, I will, and having no cards, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion to read this ordinance by title only.
Madam Chair, I move we read the ordinance number 10-2012, amending Title 8 of the Clackamas County Code by adopting Chapter 8.08, Film and Media Production, and establishing a uniform permit, process, fees, and guidelines by title only.
And I second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Savas and seconded by Commissioner Damon that we read the ordinance by title only.
Quick
Is there,
comment?
is there,
Oh.
this is for reading it, but yes, any discussion?
Well, I just wanted to say the whole purpose behind this is to make it simpler for movie production groups to go to one-stop shopping rather than having to check in with everybody. And it's not, the purpose is not to make it more complicated. And that's just all I wanted to say.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just
Yeah.
for those in the audience, clarification that it wasn't one-stop shopping, but one stop for permitting, right? Okay.
Yeah.
One stop permitting. Kind of like that, yes. So, no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0, and I will ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title only.
Okay, and I want to make a correction. This will be a new number. The 10 was the last ordinance, so that was a typo.
Oh, it's
So
supposed to be
this,
11.
I'm going to assign a number. This is going to be 11-2012.
Okay.
And it's an ordinance amending Title 8 of the Clackamas County Code by adding Chapter 8.08, Film and Media Production.
With that, it has a number, and I am supposed to announce that the second reading for this ordinance will be at the November 8th, 2012 regularly scheduled business meeting, and then we'll discuss it some more. But I do think it's an excellent move, I'll just say that. I concur with the people who already spoke. Try to simplify and streamline this growing industry in Clackamas County. So, we don't have any discussion items, so I will move on to the consent agenda and ask the clerk to read the consent agenda by title only.
Okay, the consent agenda under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of an intergovernmental agreement number 140030 with the State of Oregon Department of Human Services for the operation of the Food Stamp Employment and Training Program. Under elected officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes, approval of amendment number 1 to the intergovernmental agreement among Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, which is TriMet, and the City of Portland for provisions of transit police services. Under county administration, we have an order authorizing the continuance of the Clackamas County's participation in the Association of O&C Counties Special Advocacy Fund. And under technology services, approval of the Clackamas County e-signature and e-discovery policies. And that concludes the consent agenda.
I would consider a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Chair Lehan, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Damon and seconded by Commissioner Bernard that we approve the consent agenda. If there's no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0 and is unanimous. And then I will ask if there's a county administrator update on any items.
Yes, there is. I do have a brief but important update to share with you. You'll remember that 3 weeks ago, I reported at the board business meeting on a process to move forward and to better understand the obligations under ballot measure 3-401, which was certified on October 1st. As we know, the actual language of the measure leaves a variety of unanswered questions, and I said at that time I would direct our staff to hold off on bringing forward any intergovernmental agreements on public rail transit to the board for about 60 days, so we're doing that. I would request additional time from TriMet to comply with the remaining obligations from the August supplemental IGA. I think that was August 29th it was dated, and a letter has been sent to TriMet so requesting. And then I finally said we would hold some conversations with interested parties about the meaning and how to proceed with 3-401. And to that end, I'm happy to report that we are planning to have what we're terming a, quote, listening post, unquote, 1 week from today. That would be Thursday, November 1st from 6 to 8 p.m. And it would really be involved and engaged for the staff and public only. We're not setting this up for elected officials at this time. I think it will involve more listening and clarifying than directing. And we will be doing it in rooms 119, 120 of our Development Services building, which is across from the current building we're in, and that's at 150 Beaver Creek Road in Oregon City. So just briefly, there's a variety of questions to look into, 3 that are of interest and are just examples. Does 3-401 apply if the county is reimbursed for public transit work? And some of the work we do is totally reimbursed, so would those restrictions on public activity or county activity apply in that instance? Does it apply to expenditures of resources by county special service districts like the North Clackamas Park and Recreation District? Does it preclude the county from participating in regional rail planning efforts such as high-speed rail? And there's a variety of others that will be out. So I'm happy to say we'll be having this and hopefully kind of clarifying some of these issues as we move forward with it. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Bernard?
Actually, I hope there'll be more than one, and I hope there's a daytime one, because some people may have families and want to go home. So a daytime one, I think, would be a good idea.
I think, well, yeah, we'll wait and see how this goes, but we're open to, whatever seems reasonable in doing these things.
All right, great, thank you.
Commissioner Bernard?
So I know we're going on to Commissioner Communication. I have a meeting about 20 minutes from here. And so may I jump in? You mind?
First? Okay. Go ahead.
And I don't have that much to say except that I inspected the jail yesterday, accompanied by Captain Mike Alexander, the Craig Roberts, and Dave Kirby. And I just want to say the investments we made in the jail were significant and I think very valuable. It's certainly not a place I'd want to spend much time, but the cameras, the technological updates, especially meeting with between client and lawyer, big improvement. Then the technical improvements for visitors and our guests, big improvements. And some of the security issues were great investments. As you folks who have done inspections before, actually go into a cell and sit down. I sat down at a table of four of our visitors and talked to them about the jail. One comment made was that it was the best meal of any of the jails they'd been in. At 99 cents a meal, that's pretty good, and that's thanks to the hard work of our staff who actually don't cook. Well, they do cook, but our visitors do most of the cooking. And a vat of gravy, which is about 30 gallons, I think they serve 30-something thousand meals a month. So that's pretty good. One of the complaints was that folks on these meals lose weight, but actually Captain Alexander said most of them gain weight. They know that because when they go out, they can't fit into the clothes that they came in with. So I was very impressed, and the statistics, right now we have 6 murderers in the prison. In the jail, awaiting trial, the Gresham murder, and then the Lake Oswego one and some others, which is very unusual for them. Violent crime is actually on the rise in the country. I don't know why that is. Some of that, by the way, was the effect of Measure 11. Some of the people who served that time are now getting out. So there will be some impact on that. And one of the biggest problems I'd say in the future is the fact that a lot of the jail staff started work in the 90s and they're getting ready to retire. So there will be a challenge filling that staff. But I think it was a great investment. It's a bright, lovely place to visit. And we have some great people, great staff doing some hard work and trying to keep prices down. And I also want to compliment Cindy Becker and her now embedded mental health professionals that have really had a major impact on the quality of service we're able to provide, and the fact that we don't have to run people to clinics. They can just come in and we can deal with the problem there, which saves a lot of money. Just 80% of the people who serve time in jail are people like your neighbors who have just made a mistake. And I'm also involved in community corrections on a state level, and 93% of the folks in prison get out. And so one of the most effective programs in the jail are education classes, GEDs. Most of those people, the recidivism rate drops to about 16% if they're educated. And I think that's important. The problem with the jail is that most people average stay is 11 days. Can't get a lot of education and can't pass GED. Sometimes the sad story is they come back and come back and come back. Eventually they get enough time to pass their GED. But great work. Community corrections is, and our investments in community corrections that we made last year and this year have really paid off. So if I may be excused.
Certainly.
I need to take off. Thank you.
You don't want to hear the fascinating things the rest of us have to say.
Well, I will listen to
He'll
the
listen
tape.
later.
Thank you.
Someone else would like to volunteer or needs to rush out?
Well, I'll go, but I don't need to rush out. But
Okay.
I want to acknowledge that the last, certainly the last year, 2 years even, has been a really challenging time in Clackamas County because we've been dealing with a lot of issues about which people have legitimate, heartfelt differences of opinion. And that's the way things are going to be in a community that has the diversity of worldview that we have in Clackamas County. And so as we move through, hopefully as this election season is completed, we will be moving through many of the issues that have been very challenging for us as a community. We'll be moving into a time that will be more harmonious, and we'll be able to, as members of the community, work together on issues that we feel good about, that will cause people to be able to come together across some perspectives that haven't been on the same page for a while. And one of the programs that Cindy Becker talked about just now, earlier today, that I think is really exciting and positive and hopefully will enable different configurations of people to work together in a good way is this Healthy Eating, Active Living grant program. And I know that some people in the Oak Grove community have been talking about how they'd be really interested in launching some community garden programs or, getting involved in that. And that might give, in other parts of our county also, might give people who don't necessarily work together, who don't necessarily go to the same churches or schools or social gatherings to have a new common denominator that they're interested in. And I would also say, so I hope people will consider, especially after we're done with this election cycle, which, people may have different views about what they want to have happen in the course of. I hope people will consider taking up an activity that enables them to work with folks they don't always spend time with in a new way. And similarly, whomever wins in this election process, I hope that people will work together to address what I think are some of the fundamental challenges that we face, namely, as we look at transit and transportation in the future, we do have to evolve how we look at it. We do have to deal with the fact that there's less money coming from the federal government, that major infrastructure projects are expensive, and that high-speed bus and lateral bus connections between Washington County and Clackamas County, not everything running through downtown Portland, those are going to be really important priorities. And we've got to look at that, and we've got to think about ways we can move that forward. And we also have to think about density issues. I think that a density standard of 20 units to an acre, once talked about, has never been adopted as a standard that applies to the region, but people are really worried about that. And even 15 units to an acre seems like a lot, and I think we need to pioneer a way that we, in the community that borders and sometimes is just a fundamentally rural farmland area, that has a level of density as we grow, because parts of our community will grow, that people can live with when it borders on farmland or it tapers to farmland. So I think we need to really look at customizing how we implement regional policies about growth and development and transportation so that they fit the economic reality we have now, and so they fit the community we have now. And to think that that's important doesn't mean we have to have always agreed on other issues up to now, but we are where we are, and going forward, I think we need to evolve still as a region, but maybe as Region 2.0, recognizing we're in a new reality. So I would encourage friends and acquaintances and fellow community members out there that as we move through this election cycle, we both try to find ways that we can have common ground with people we may have had challenging interactions with in the last year or two, and also look at ways that we can customize how we engage in the region so that it works reasonably well for all of us, while still acknowledging that, there are reasons why we need to work together with partners in Portland and Hillsborough and other areas. So thanks.
I'll go. I just kind of have a grab bag of things. First, I do want to respond to a couple of the comments that were made in our citizen communication. One is to extend an apology to Kevin, and it's too bad that he's not here. He asked us specifically, what are we doing about his issue? And I have to be honest, there are 5 of us, and we all can't track everybody's issue as much as we would really like to do that. And so, honestly, the last 2 times that he's come before us, I've been surprised that he's come before us and said, here I am again, what's going on? Because it was my understanding, as Commissioner Leininger had said, that Mr. Madcore and Mr. Sedaris were working with him closely. So I just want to put that out there, that I understand that that's happening, and I really appreciate Mr. Sedaris, you stepping forward and personally wanting to champion working with Mr. Phillips on this. So, not that I don't want to see Mr. Phillips again, but not necessarily on this issue if we don't have information to put forward. And I want to thank you, Barbara, for coming forward and for your conditional resignation, for your good service on the part of Clackamas River Water, and for your commitment to what's in the broader district's good, by wanting to step down and by really trying to figure out how we can help this embattled board move forward in a positive direction. So I just want to thank you for your service on the board and coming forward and talking with us today. Yvonne, regarding signs, so both Commissioner or Chair Lehan and I we have nothing to do with the defacing of the signs or the John Ludlow's a bully campaign, so to speak, that's going on. And I will say, I really appreciate you putting your call for civility out, as people feel passionately on either side, that we respect our, personal property, and the opinions of each other. And I will say that one of my large signs, was actually defaced with a machete, which was actually very disturbing to see that happen. So I'm certainly looking for a call to the end of sign defacing. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And Les, it's too bad that Les stepped out. So Mariana, I hope that you will carry this forward to Les, is that I was curious how many times Les had come before us in the from the June that I was appointed to, for a year. And I actually counted 36 times that he'd been before us, and that was just through June of this year. So if you add in the months since now, I'd say he's approaching 50 times that he's come before us. So I think he sold himself short. I know, I think it's way more than that. And then for anybody who was listening about the campaign contributions, the question that Les raised, there was an article in the Oregonian on Saturday about all 4 of the candidates for a commission, and it did give a little, just a brief summary about where our campaign contributions have come from. And I know that my larger contributions have come from police and fire, and health care. And I have received a fairly large contribution, about $3,000, from Hamilton Construction, which is in no way associated with light rail. So I just wanted to put that out there. And the last thing I want to say is it's property tax time, and oh, how I wish property tax statements didn't come right before Election Day. But alas, they do. And I was talking with the chair of my CPO last night about just a number of issues. And in everyone's property tax statement, you receive this really nice little summation from Bob Vroman, our assessor, who's just very smart, dedicated man. And it looks like this. Let's see, I'll turn it that way. There you go. And I really encourage everyone to take a look at that and see what it has to say. It has a little chart about where our tax dollars go, and I can't emphasize enough that the county receives 18% of that tax bill. I know that there are folks who honestly think that it all goes to the county, but it doesn't. So I just want to put that out there. But primarily what I want to bring your attention to is on the back side of this, Bob Vroman and his staff are convening town halls across the county. They started this week, they're going through next week and the week after. The meeting tonight is in Wilsonville. There are meetings just about every night next week and the following week. So look at that list of town halls, go to those meetings. You can learn about senior and disabled citizen deferrals. You can learn about disabled veteran exemptions. You can learn about ag and forest deferrals. You can ask questions about where do your tax dollars go. Bob and his staff are wonderful. They really do want to engage people about their property tax bill. So, and Bob will be here next week at our commission meeting to talk with us about taxes and where we're headed and what's going on. But really take advantage of these town hall meetings. It's a great opportunity to engage about your property tax bill. It's not that I don't want to hear it when you call me, but I don't have as much information to share as Bob does. So do go to one of these meetings. So that's it.
Well, it's kind of a great segue. I was going to talk a little bit about the taxes. That little pie that you saw earlier totals about $629 million as of today. That's what's really predicted as the increase over the $624 million that it was last year, which is about a 0.83% increase. And I won't get into numbers because it's quite complex, but we had a great presentation at the Tualatin Valley Fire District, and they've been doing a lot of analysis on some of the mathematical anomalies that are occurring with regards to property tax collection. And last year and the year past, they had focused on compression due to measures 5 and 50. And also now what they presented Tuesday night was the lowering or the loss of property value when real market value meets assessed value, and how that dynamic is occurring here in Clackamas County and how that compounds compression. And I'm doing a lot of analysis right now on how that's going to impact our general fund, which we have appropriated, or we've been the benefactor of increasing revenue, a little bit increasing every year. And that amount of increase has been declining, but yet inflation is going up and up at a tremendously more faster rate than what we're collecting. So I think some of our predictions that when I first came here as a commissioner in 2010 or 2011, what was predicted for the year following was graver than what we experienced. And even this year, I'm realizing that what we forecasted for next year is going to be even more significant negatively, unfortunately, than what was predicted. So I hope to have some of that, better assessed as what those impacts are to us. But, I think, unfortunately, that the rate of inflation is impacting us at a far greater rate, which means we're going to have to do a lot more belt tightening. I did want to mention, someone mentioned Oak Lodge Sanitary and Gardening. Oak Lodge Sanitary District, actually we have done, when I was on the board, we have actually held sessions, especially during the spring and summer, on gardening and other classes on Saturdays. And this weekend, on Saturday, at Rex Putnam High School, Oak Lodge Sanitary District is once again a little bit different this time. Not necessarily on gardening, but really on more streams. So there's a class, little thing you can attend, 10 a.m. To 2 p.m. on Saturday at Rex Putnam High School, being put on by Oak Lodge Sanitary and some other basin councils that are interested in doing more stewardship with our surface water, creeks and streams through the area. So I'd encourage folks to attend that, and perhaps they can get some information on any kind of gardening that's taking place. But it is something that's been growing pretty significantly, interest in the area of doing more of that. And that's all I have for today.
Coincidentally enough, I was going to mention that Clackamas Community College just had last month had the first annual Small Farm School, and that was an all-day program, and they had 200 people sign up for the Small Farm School, and covered a wide range of things, from tool repair to pest control, all day long. And the individuals who came to that were from 13 different counties, but the largest number from Clackamas County. And I will say, as a someone who grew up on a farm, on a very large farm, but as an adult, I have not been a farmer until just recently. So now I'm what they call an urban farmer, perhaps a small or micro farmer, since I have my 4 chickens, and I realize Jamie has many more chickens than me, and I also have bees. So we keep bees and chickens, and that's our foray into urban farming. But it is becoming more popular all the time. And the other thing that Clackamas County offers, of course, is the Master Gardening Program and Extension. And so there are, and actually in terms of beekeeping, one of the biggest in the state bee outfitters is Rural Bee, and it's here in Clackamas County over on 82nd. And they offer classes. So just want to remind people that this is the time of year, as your gardening needs are winding down, to do the planning and take the classes and get ready for next spring. That's what we did. We took a bee class, a half-day bee class before we got our bees, and those are offered in the winter usually because you order up your bees in the spring. So this is a good time to be planning, and you don't need a lot of land to be an urban farmer or a small lot farmer. But it's a popular thing in Clackamas County. We think we saw that with the fair participation and the and all the kids who are involved in Clackamas County. There is an announcement up on your screen for that Paul just brought up, this watershed event, and it's from 10 to 2 at Rex Putnam. So there's that if you want to look at that. And then a couple of other items. Last week, I talked about the Arch Bridge ribbon cutting, and this week, I think, well, everyone but Jamie was at the Jug Handle. We all were at the Jug Handle ribbon cutting. So it seems like we're doing ribbon cuttings for large transportation projects fairly frequently. And the Jug Handle is the intersection of 213 and 205. And that work has been going on for the last 2 years, a big ODOT project, and Oregon City and Clackamas County involved in that one. Don't ask me why it's called a jug handle. I still can't describe what makes it look like a jug handle, but doesn't really, I can't see it. Campaign related. Contributions, if there are questions about contributions, people should know that you can look up any candidate in the state of Oregon on ORSTAR, which is at the Secretary of State's website. But if you Google ORSTAR, O-R-E-S-T-A-R, up comes that, it's going to pop right up there. So you can find out within, up to the last 7 days, what every candidate has spent their money on, where they got their money. It's all there for city councilors on up to a statewide office. So that's accessible and not a mystery. And in regards to signs, I haven't really spoken to the sign issue before, but as Commissioner Damon said, my campaign has done very little signs. I will say that signs are a vexing issue for all candidates and, and for the county and code compliance, and it is just very difficult. Campaign advisors, almost to a person, certainly mine, would prefer that you had no signs at all. They don't like signs, they don't want you to have signs, but if you don't have signs, then your supporters are crushed. Where's my sign? Where can I get a sign? I want a sign. And so a lot of, really the only, I have very few signs up anywhere, and the ones I have are to give to supporters so that they can be helpful and enjoy having a sign. But they are a pain to monitor. And in terms of signs, sign damage or stealing of or anything, it's very difficult to know what goes on because people might deface a sign because they like the other candidate, or they might deface it, they don't care about the candidate, they just don't like the other candidate. Or it might be that they don't like either of the candidates, they just hate the signs. There are so many different possibilities for why people take out their frustration on other people's signs that there's that's very difficult to even know, other than it just is. So I never touch anybody else's signs. I instruct my people not to touch anybody else's signs. But it does run into a freedom of speech position when other people put out signs that are not attached to our campaigns. Then it's then it's even more difficult to say you should not put up signs, whatever. So anyway, all I can say is signs, campaign signs are a vexing issue, I think, for people who have to put up with them in the landscape, for us who have to take care of them or put them up or buy them or anything. And it's one thing I think we will all look forward to is the signs going away in a couple of weeks, and they'll all be disappeared. And with that, I just want to say that this is our last meeting before Halloween. Halloween is next week, Wednesday, before we meet again. So I want to remind people to be very careful Halloween night and watch out for small goblins running about your neighborhood. And with that, nothing else before us. We are adjourned.